Hi everybody, it's Joe Chaffee here on this Wednesday night, November the 14th. And I'm kind of astounded, if only because of the fact that it's November the 14th. And when you look at, and I'll show it to you in just a moment, but when we look at the U.S. weather map with all the watches and warnings up, you think we were in January at some time. It just is insane how widespread winter weather advisories and winter storm watches, winter storm warnings all over the place. It's just huge. So we've got a lot going on, so I think it's probably best that we get right to it at this point. And I'm going to start with that mosaic of watches and warnings and whatnot. I mean, it's just loaded here. So take a look at this map. I mean, it's just insane to see this huge geography going from the middle Mississippi Valley all the way even down into the northern Mississippi and eastern Arkansas, where we have winter weather advisories, and also in western Tennessee. We've got a small area of winter storm warnings in southwestern Illinois and in eastern Missouri, including St. Louis, which is forecast to get about half a foot there. Those advisories extend into central and southern Indiana, most of Kentucky, most of Ohio, except the extreme northwest corner, a good chunk of West Virginia, western PA. Then we have winter storm warnings up for central Pennsylvania, down through the western half of Maryland, through the western part of Virginia along the Blue Ridge Mountains in the land of Johnny Quest, and in eastern West Virginia and western North Carolina. Now, the further south that you go with those winter storm warnings, by the way, it's less with regard to snow and more with regards to ice. We have winter storm watches that have been posted for a large chunk of upstate New York. Advisories up for eastern Pennsylvania, down toward Maryland into the D.C. area. We have advisories up in most of New Jersey except the coastal counties, and Long Island not in it. Neither is New York City, but New England is covered with the exception of northernmost Maine. We've got winter storm watches up for much of central and northern New England, and winter weather advisories surrounding that. And those watches also go down into Connecticut along and north of Route 84. So very, very busy just about everywhere in the Mississippi. You've got a freeze warning down in the Gulf, the central Gulf there, in Louisiana and central and southern Mississippi, and western Alabama on the backside of this low that's moving out. Elsewhere, just a small area of winter storm watches in southeastern Wyoming, and some winter weather advisories up in northern, small portion of northern Montana. So this storm for November, this is a big deal. I mean, at least given the time of year, this is definitely a big deal. So radar is next, and the radar signature tonight is impressive. You've got, whenever you see, anytime you see that hook, that comma shape, that is telling you that you've got a powerhouse of a system at least aloft, and that's what we have here. And I bring that up because that might put a couple of wrinkles in the forecast for areas in eastern Pennsylvania, western New Jersey, into parts of the Hudson Valley, west of the Hudson, and then maybe along and north of Route 84. And I'll explain that in just in a little while. But that upper air storm is what is bringing the snows that they're going to see in St. Louis and through southern Illinois. They've already had snow in western Tennessee. There was a multi-car pileup there that made the news this afternoon. To the east, we've got heavy rain. Rain has been almost unrelenting across parts of Georgia and Alabama here as that rainfall area continues to move northward. It's a pretty loaded radar here in Kentucky down through Tennessee, and now you're starting to get that precip moving into western North Carolina and western Virginia, and all of this extends even further south into the Florida Panhandle. So This is what's coming up the coast. Meanwhile, up in the northeast, you can see it's very quiet with this big high that's built in and funneling down cold air. I hadn't been outside for a while, and I went out a little while ago just to grab a bite to eat, and the temperatures here were already down into the 30-degree range. It's cold. This is cold air that's coming down from southeastern Canada, and it basically sets the table up for what's going to happen for tomorrow. One of the interesting finds I discovered, and I'll put this link up for you folks in the chat board here. Let me come back for 1 second as you all join up. For those of you who want to take a look at this, this is an interactive surface map, and it's really cool because you can zoom in on whatever part of the country and see. This is from 4 o'clock this afternoon, the surface plot, and we can see what's going on in terms of the actual current weather, which, while we spend time on radar and satellite, we don't usually we don't spend the amount of time we probably should spend on the surface map. So you get at least a flavor of how this is all happening. But when you plot everything, you've got the old stall frontal boundary that extends from the Atlantic across North Florida and down into the eastern Gulf. And you can tell by you look at the temperatures and the dew points that are south of this frontal boundary, and you've got dew points in the mid-70s and temperatures up in the low to mid-80s. So this is very warm tropical air here. Jump to the other side, and you start very quickly going to 60s and 50s and even 40s up into northern Georgia and northern Alabama. So we have some kind of an inverted trough here with a low, probably some kind of low center that's going to come out of all of this, if not while it's over Florida, for sure when it gets up off the southeast coast of the United States. And meanwhile, with the reflection of that upper low, you can see how the isobars are kind of getting pulled back to the northwest. You got the upper low that's sitting back into through southeastern Missouri and northeastern Arkansas. And you've got your temperatures here all in the low 30s. Some of these reporting stations at 4 o'clock were reporting either light snow or moderate snow. That might be Evansville here. No, Evansville is up this way. I'm not sure what station that is, but they got that 3-star moderate snow there from earlier today. And further north, all these temperatures all in the low 30s, going all the way up through the Great Lakes. And now, of course, here in the Northeast, again, these were 4 p.m. temperatures. So you've got a number of places that were just in upstate New York, especially in the 20s. And in fact, if that's Plattsburgh or Messina, that's 14, the 4 o'clock temperature there. So you've got a north wind coming down the Hudson Valley. This is draining all this cold air. When we go up into southeastern Canada, temperatures are all down in the low to mid-teens, down even to 10 or less in some places. So we are dealing with a significant cold air mass for the time of year, which, again, that's part of the process of what we're going to be going through for tomorrow. So I put the link there up on the chat for you. This is actually a fun map, and I'm going to keep it close by to use going forward. And you can even look at the history of this. You can go back a day, back a week. If we want to go back a year, let's see if we load back a year ago. That's very interesting. So a year ago, we had temperatures in the 40s, upper 30s and low 30s to the north. There was a high up in the St. Lawrence Valley, but not a particularly strong one. And it looks like we had a little bit of activity going on in parts of the plains in the upper Midwest, but no big storms out here on the horizon. A totally different map from what we have right now. Storm coming into the Pacific Northwest last year at this time. There's a 992 low that's sitting out there with the big occluded front approaching the coastline of Vancouver and British Columbia. And out on the east and in the Atlantic, we see the tail end of a storm that was just east of Nova Scotia. So, pretty cool that you're able to actually do this, to pull up surface maps going back through history. And they say that the maps actually go back This is the newly upgraded version of the interactive surface analysis combines maps archived in recent years with historical surface analysis archive, which are maps prior to 2005. So there's a calendar on the entry box near the upper right corner of the page, so you can take a look at what the available years are. So, you know, here's your calendar. So look at this. I mean, it goes all the way back to 1985. So this is quite a useful tool, and we are going to make use of it for sure. All right, so moving along, we're of course now waiting for what's going to happen for tomorrow. And with respect to the forecast, so here are your snow forecasts now. These are total snowfalls that are being indicated for the areas out in in Illinois, up to just south of Chicago. Most of Indiana gets about 1 inch or 2. There's a couple of spots here in the south that get closer to 3 inches. And then you have this concentration of 4 to 6 in and around St. Louis. And then amounts kind of tail off a bit as you go down. And much of what's back into western Tennessee, eastern Arkansas, much of that may have already fallen. Now let's see if we can get the Northeast to update here, because sometimes it's a little bit slow on the bringing the data in, but starting to populate. And you can find this if you go to digital.weather.gov, by the way. So these are the snowfall amounts. I'm going to have to give it, let's go to Friday morning and move it forward, because okay, now this makes sense. So now we can see what's going on. And I said, again, when you see those winter storm warnings that are down to the south into the mountains of West Virginia and Western Virginia, there are some places that are going to wind up with about half a foot, but then you start to tail that off. When you get further south and west of there, even though we have winter storm warnings up, it's, again, really more because of ice than anything else. And then going up to the north, you start to get into some 3, 4, 5 inch amounts, 6 inch amounts, 8 inch amounts, going up through parts of upstate New York, and from there, north and east up into New England. You can see how the amounts sort of tail off right along the coast. Now, I'm in the area on Long Island that has no snow, at least according to this, the National Weather Service, the database, their forecast database. New Jersey, 2 to 3 inch amounts, 4 inch amounts in parts of the Hudson Valley as you start to go up toward Dutchess County. I think that there could be an upside surprise when this is all done Friday morning. Not from what's coming during tomorrow afternoon and evening. I think you're going to get that burst tomorrow afternoon and evening. It's going to put down whatever it puts down. But when I was talking about that upper low before, which I'll show you in a second why I think it's important, that upper low, if it remains vigorous, and the European model has been kind of harping on this for the last 3 days, that upper low is going to remain vigorous as it moves northeastward and passes over the state of New Jersey. So usually to the north and west of where the track of that upper low is, you can wind up into some heavy snow. So when we go back and talk about that radar where I told you, you see that comma shape where the hook is, if somebody gets under that Friday morning, you're going to have some dynamic cooling going on in a big way. And that might mean that somebody up in this area, northeastern PA, northwest New Jersey, on up to Orange County, north from there into Dutchess County, the Catskills, somebody in there, if that happens and you get underneath that comma head, this is where you could wind up, as I said, with those, what I've been referring to as the upside surprise. We'll also give you an indication of, with respect to the ice that's going to come out of all of this, and the total new ice. You know, you do have some spots where the ice is not too bad. I mean, generally under 1/10 of an inch, but you also have 1/4 of an inch or more icing amounts from south central PA, maybe the western part of what you would consider southwestern PA, over toward Altoona, on southward from there on into Maryland, and then into West Virginia and the Blue Ridge Mountains, 1/4 of an inch, almost 1/3 of an inch in some places, and then it kind of whittles down a bit, maybe to the highest elevations of the Smokies in western North Carolina. So this again is a pretty significant icing event. Also, you're seeing icing in the Ohio Valley. back through Kentucky and into Ohio and southern Indiana, western PA and parts of western New York. And on the northern edge of this, you're also seeing a little bit of icing in the middle and upper Hudson Valley and into parts of Massachusetts and Connecticut. Some of that is going to come after the first initial burst of snow that's going to occur. So we're going to go ultra short range here. We don't have the 0Z run yet. The 0Z HRRR model actually goes out, sometimes goes out 36 hours. The 6, 12, 18, and 0Z runs on the HRRR go out 36 hours, and all the other ones go out 18. So we can take the HRRR as far as it goes, and this is for the first shot here is for 8 o'clock, which is coming up in about 15 minutes. So when you look at the radar mosaic and you look at the HRRR, I mean, they should be an almost perfect match. They should be. Sometimes, I've seen it where it's not, okay? So just bear that in mind. So, you start to get that high to the north, settling in upstate New York, but here comes the moisture. That by 7 a.m. tomorrow, we've got sleet in much of Maryland, northeastern Virginia. It changes over to snow as you go a little bit west and south of there. Then, of course, you've got rain and some heavy rain and thunderstorms breaking out along the Carolina coast from Wilmington south to just east of Charleston. This is where you're probably going to get your low center to develop during the day on Friday. And then we'll start to advance this. This is at 10 o'clock Thursday morning. I'm sorry, I said Friday. I meant Thursday. This is 10 o'clock Thursday morning. And you've got the leading edge of the snow now moving into southeastern PA. By 1 p.m., the northern fringe of precip is mostly rain in New Jersey and then changes to snow in Pennsylvania. The reason for that is that you've got the wind coming in off the water, and the way the high is, sitting there just off the coast of Maine, it's ridged down into Pennsylvania, into the mountains. So that's where the cold air winds up damming and getting trapped, whereas you're getting this warmer air coming in off the water. A setup like this in January or even mid to late December would be a bit different. I think you would probably be seeing more snow than anything else throughout the southern half of New Jersey. And again, this is actually at noon. I'm sorry, because it only goes out, the 18 hour is only taking us to noontime on Thursday. So there's your northern fringe here, running from just south of Sandy Hook to just north of Trenton, and then north and west of there. And there isn't a whole lot of cold air initially behind it. Again, in a winter system, you would probably see much more of this precip on the west, that northwest side would be in the form of snow, but because of the fact that we are at November 14th, the cold air is really relatively limited, and it's what's left of that high that's producing it. So from here, why don't we get very tight? And by the way, here is the, we'll use the positive snow growth, because I think that really is the better one to use. And you've got some streaky amounts of a couple of inches, and even some small streaks, probably again in the mountains and the higher elevations, where you'll wind up with some 4, 5, 6 inch amounts. And the snowfall, of course, for the 18 hours, for the last for the 18-hour period, what you're seeing back through Missouri and Illinois and Indiana, that is all, of course, front end loaded to the first handful of hours while this storm system is pulling out to the northeast. So to take us further along, we will jump to the NAM, which actually is a little bit faster with its precip. This is at 1 o'clock now. The snow, it actually is going to change over to snow at this point on the northern fringe of that precip in New Jersey. The NAM actually is a little colder than the HRRR, and showing perhaps a bit more in the way of vertical motion, which is allowing for some dynamic cooling to occur here on the northern fringe of the precip line. At this point, snow has changed to sleet through parts of southeast and south central Pennsylvania, back through Virginia and West Virginia, but it actually goes back to snow, believe it or not. Again, that's the dynamic cooling at work. By this is 2 o'clock, snow into New York City and Long Island, and then it continues in the afternoon. Probably vacillates back and forth in some of the coastal areas. Long Island has a habit of doing that sometimes in these instances. Look where the surface low is, by the way, how far to the left it is. It is pretty far inland into North Carolina here. So coastal North Carolina is probably going to get warm sectored by this to some degree. And on up it goes. And now we are at Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. Much of New Jersey, south of Route 78, is raining. You've got sleet, and then you've got snow. The Hudson Valley, northernmost New Jersey, northeastern PA, and then across much of the southern half of New York State, on up into southern New England, all snow there, with a surface low sitting off the Delaware coast. By the way, the gradient is going to tighten up quite a bit with that big high sitting in down East Maine at 1032 high, 1004 millibar low. So you are going to get some pretty gusty winds here developing later Thursday night into Friday. Here's the tight view of this at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Now, going forward from here, this is where it kind of gets really tricky with the forecast. There are going to be areas just north and west of New York City that are going to have a really tough time getting above freezing and a real tough time seeing that sleet changing over to rain. You're trying to get some of that rain is coming into southeastern PA and working its way westward. It's also going to have a bit of a fight there too. So much of PA is going to be getting, Pennsylvania, getting frozen or freezing precipitation through tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And then gradually it's just probably going to come to an end. There is a bit of a dry slot here. You see how the precip just kind of stops across New Jersey at some point later tomorrow evening. It's waiting for the upper support to swing around. That's producing the snow back through Pennsylvania and West Virginia at this point. And if you look at the NAM, you see how the presentation of the radar echoes, that hook again shows up. And the NAM has some rain. It also has an area of sleet going into northeastern PA. And then it actually changes it over to snow with the surface low sitting over central Long Island. This is Friday morning. The European has a deeper low off the central New Jersey coast, and it has this, the same idea, but with a stronger comma head, okay, is what we call it. And this is the reason why the European snow maps, the snowfall forecast maps on the European, we're forecasting, believe it or not, 1 foot plus some ounce in northeastern PA, parts of northwestern New Jersey, on up into Orange County, northernmost Rockland County, and on north and northeast from there. It really was very bullish on this idea, and then the low moves away to the northeast. The upper feature that's driving this, again, as we said earlier, was that wrapped up upper low. Take a look at it here on the GFS, okay? This is from this morning. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 contours, 3, 4, 5, 6 contours with an upper low sitting over Evansville, Indiana. And that upper low actually holds together pretty well. It does weaken some, but there's still very much an identifiable feature here of that upper low as it moves into western Maryland and right over northern New Jersey. Again, north and west of that upper low track, it's the surface low and the upper low basically become vertically stacked, okay? And that is something that we have to concern ourselves with. If that low is at least as vigorous as the models show, or if it winds up being a little bit more vigorous, again, upside surprises are possible, I think, in areas from northeastern Pennsylvania on up into maybe northwest Connecticut, western Mass, southern Vermont, middle and upper Hudson Valley, maybe even a little bit further south than that as that upper low goes by. And the other upper trough that's ringing through the Great Lakes is the one that's kicking it along. It just kind of gives it a big punt on out to the northeast. Really kind of fascinating to see this. If I think, when we had the situation back with Hurricane Sandy, it was actually the snow was generated not so much by a surface low, but really more by the dynamics of the upper features as it went by. The atmosphere wasn't really all that cold as the system approached, but the dynamic cooling that the upper low caused. And this, you see snows like that this time of year, and you also see them in the spring happening that way. But you know, in the regular part of the winter season, they're usually driven more by you get the upper features, but the overall atmosphere is usually cold enough where you're not really dependent a whole lot on the idea of dynamic cooling. So I'm just taking a swig of my my espresso here. So that gets kicked along the northeast. And the other thing, of importance here would be to look at. I'm going to go to the European, because I want to show you the temperature profile here on the European as to why this is something that we have to watch. So I'm going to go at the 850 millibar level, or roughly the 5,000 foot level. And you like to use the 0 line as the rain snow line. And if you look at, there's the surface low sitting just south of Long Island. But you see how it drags that cold air back down on the back side here, right down across the Hudson Valley, into the Catskills, down into western New Jersey, and even into southern New Jersey. It's right in here in this area that I think you're going to have to watch this upper feature as it goes by. It's a long shot, but I do believe it is worth considering. And when you look at the other models, they're not that far off with that idea. Yeah, here's the NAM. I mean, the NAM really is not that far off. It's got the surface low over central Long Island. And when we showed you the precip before, it had that hook feature, and changing it over to snow, it just, perhaps it may not have the geography exactly right, but it has the same idea. And the GFS also has the same idea, but it's not nearly as vigorous as an upper feature. So the 850, the cold air at the 850 is not quite drawn down. It's not quite as vertically stacked as the other models. Just want to take a look at the 3 kilometer NAM to see if, yeah, I mean, look at the 3 kilometer NAM. I mean, this is really, it's interesting with the 3 kilometer NAM, but if you watch it from this level at 850 millibars, you look at the big cold pool here, back through Missouri, down into Arkansas, and into western Tennessee. I mean, this is what's happening. This is what's happening during the day on Thursday. That's the upper low. There's your surface low, that 1,003 low that's sitting east of North Carolina. You're watching the cold air in the east being eaten away by the warm air. The 0, it's still, you know, cold enough down into southern New Jersey at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The 0 line gets to New York City roughly at about 5 or 6 o'clock. There's still some pockets of cold air at 850 there. And then here comes that upper feature. Here comes the 850 low. There, watch the 850 low. On the NAM, on the 3 kilometer NAM. That's that cold pool at 850, and it hooks around. There's your surface low. So this is, again, I think it's really worth considering. We've got the simulated satellite. You probably can see it here too if you watch this. So here's the advection that's coming up, of course, and you see the upper low. You can see the upper low there on the satellite, just kind of spinning there on the simulated satellite. That is an identifiable feature all the way through, and right here Friday morning, this is where we'll have to see how it lines up, because somebody in this area, in this, you know, the greens and the darker blues right in there, that's where you could wind up seeing precip changing back to snow before it's all said and done. The surface on the 3 kilometer actually does that. If you notice, there's your shot for late tomorrow afternoon and evening in and around the New York City area. Then it lifts up, and then here comes your comma head, and then out it goes. So a little wrinkle here, and another thing with this is the fact that now that we're tomorrow night at this time, we would have probably seen you know, the bulk of that first shot of precip will be going by. We'll look back then and see how accurate these models were with all this. You know, I've been saying the last few days how nerve-wracking the first storm of the season is, and it really is. It's enough to drive you crazy. But because I was thinking back, it was probably the late last March was the last time that we were dealing with all of this. Now, why don't we look ahead? I'm going to take out the whole U.S. here because we're going into Thanksgiving week, and let's at least take a look at what's going on elsewhere, because we do have some snow coming down into the Rockies on Friday, and as the next cold high comes down. Once again, by the way, the models, in their early runs, have been kind of plunging all this cold air southward, only to really scale it back, and it's done it again for early next week. There's some kind of low that forms off the southeast coast that goes well out to sea. This week, other than weak systems, next week, I'm sorry, other than weak systems coming along, really looks relatively uneventful. The 12Z run of the GFS did want to have some kind of coastal storm and nor'easter next weekend, and while I do see the pieces here, they didn't really come together on this run. You got that low on this run way off. Look at the difference. It's just hilarious sometimes when you look from run to run in just one model run from before. And this was the 12Z run, which had another storm coming out of the Gulf states, and a deep 980-ish low running up the coast by next Saturday evening. This is Saturday, November 24th. And when you look at the new run for the same time frame, it's this low that's sitting northeast of the Bahamas. So apparently, at least on the prior run, the jet stream timed out beautifully, and on this run, it did not. And then you got another cold front, so who knows if this is real. Another shot of rather cold air being indicated in the long range. Whether it winds up happening or not remains to be seen. I will say, when we look at the upper air, the model continues to show blockiness, blocking developing from Scandinavia and then kind of pushing over toward Greenland. You can see it on the upper right. It keeps the trough. It tries to keep the trough pinned in the eastern part of the United States, and you wind up still dealing with troughs coming into the east. By the way, for you folks in Southern California, of course, you've been dealing with this really dry pattern. Clearly, it has been bone dry, and as we move into next week, the models have been advertising some kind of system coming in early next week into Southern California. You see it here off the coast of Southern California Monday night into Tuesday. It's weaker on the last couple of runs than the prior run, and then there's another system behind that kind of gets kicked along. So you're going to be getting into a wetter pattern going forward. You've got a very active Pacific jet developing, moving weather systems along. And the flow is a little bit split because you do have a feed that's coming down out of Canada in the long term. I think that with the presence of a blocking signature on the map at the end of November and the beginning of December, we'll have to wait and see how the models handle all this going forward. But it is a potentially dangerous pattern. And I think when you looked at the 12Z run that I showed you before, when you look at the run from 6 hours ago, which is a very, had this really dynamic system. Another trough here swinging up into the east and lifting up the east coast. This is the upper air that was painted for, this is day 11 now on the old run. Big block in between Iceland and Greenland, pushing westward into Labrador. You got this deep trough that runs from north central Canada all the way down into the southeast coast of the United States. And it just, that lifts out, and then you get another one that rotates in. I think this is the danger that you could see, that you could have in the pattern going forward with all this blocking running around. That if the pieces come together, that you could wind up with maybe a significant storm of some kind during the month of December. I don't have the new teleconnection, so the only ones I have were from yesterday. Which showed the NAO going rather deeply negative, crashing to neutral in the next day or two. Actually, the 15th is where it gets to neutral, so that's tomorrow. So this was from yesterday. So hopefully, they're not always good about updating this. They seem to to miss out a day once a week when it comes to updating this sort of stuff. So hopefully they will update it tomorrow. Here's the evening satellite, by the way. We just pull up the U.S. satellite loop really quick before I come to the chat board. And hang on, there you go. So you can see the moisture field on the GO 16, the detail. By the way, that tropical system just never materialized, and I think that was really a key here in making things colder in the eastern part of the United States. I think it impacted the Atlantic Ridge, making it not quite as strong as it otherwise would have been. But this is why sometimes you can't really, you look at models making storms, they don't always happen. And here was a great instance of where it didn't happen. By the way, if you look over toward the middle of the picture, you can see the upper low there spinning almost separately from all the high clouds and the tropical moisture that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico and streaming on up to the northeast. I actually was quite surprised today to see the clouds as far north as they were, because that was not really indicated yesterday. They looked like they should have sat further south, and so they were kind of a surprise, because I had high clouds here pretty much all day long, and even though we did have some sunshine. All right, I'm coming to the chat board, so give me 1 second here to set up. Nice to see a nice crowd here. So let me just say real quick that if you are in the New York, New Jersey, Southern Connecticut, Long Island area, New Jersey, Southern Connecticut, Long Island, and I left out the lower Hudson Valley. I've got a free app if you've got if you have an Android device. I did find out today, by the way, that if you have an iPhone, that hopefully we'll have it in a week. Okay, it's sitting on somebody's desk at Apple Computer, waiting for them to approve it. So keep your fingers crossed on that. But if you've got if you have a Droid, here is the link to download it. The download is free. If you are if you're really into weather, you could download the app, and then separately you can sign up to my weather platform on Patreon, and that's just $2 a month. And I just put the link up for that for that as well. And thank you for those of you who have considered it. So. Are the dynamics there for thunder snow? Asked John Trabacchino. I didn't look to see. I will say, Joe and I were talking about this last night, though, about the fact that the lifted indices measuring the relative stability or instability of the atmosphere were pointing to the idea that we could wind up seeing maybe some convection. I'm not gonna say completely no. But if that underneath that upper low, if it holds together, I guess it's probably not impossible. I wouldn't rule it out. Israel, your first flakes will be at about 1:30. Okay, Ryan Hastava, do you think that areas in northwest Nassau could end up with a little more snow than the immediate coast? Yeah, if look, if the South Shore winds up with a slight coating before it goes over to rain, you probably could wind up with a bit more than that. I think there's a chance if the snow comes in fast enough and the cold air is a little more important, and that warm ocean doesn't get too much in the way. You get a quick burst that puts down a coating to an inch or so for parts of northern Nassau, northwestern Suffolk County, especially where there's some elevation. I certainly think that's a possibility. You go from New York City north and west, I think your chances are greater of getting a thump with a slushy couple of inches on the ground. Ethan Bean, East Tennessee will have the best chance for snow this winter. Well, watch that blocking pattern. If you remember last year, if I remember correctly, last year the snows and ice came to the south pretty early. So watch that blocking pattern and see how that sets up, because if at least you have that there. If you had no block, we wouldn't have to be having this conversation, because I would simply say that the pattern is all wrong. But with the presence of that Atlantic block, that tends to favor colder air down into the southeastern part of the United States. So you got a shot. Now, whether the other puzzle pieces are going to be there, I don't know. Okay, we'll see. Scott Briller, Central Park has the chance to get that 1 inch so that it would only be the 7th time since 1960. So basically, it really works out to like once every 10 years that New York City in itself sees a 1 inch of snowfall. Scott, is that a 1 inch snowfall for one event, or is that a 1 inch for the whole month? Okay, because you could wind up in a month that's had like 2 inches, and maybe the snowfalls were 0.7, 0.5, and they were all fractional. 4 to 6 for Binghamton. It says Ethan Bean. I can go along with that on a 10 to 1 ratio because I think that's where the ratios are going to be. Connor Letty, the European, is saying what it's saying with respect to the 1 foot for the areas in and around northeastern PA and on up toward the Catskills is because it's really put all its eggs in that upper low, holding together and being stronger than some of the other models are doing. Gale warnings are forecast for the coastal areas for Thursday. Rick 8013, that is correct. And in fact, they put up wind advisories for the coastal counties in New Jersey for Thursday night into Friday morning. And Climo is huge this time of year, right? 53. Think about the fact that if you wanted to have a snowstorm this time of year with temperatures staying below freezing all the way through, the average high is 53. So you need an anomaly of 20. You basically need 20 degrees below normal. Okay. And I'm not even talking about just off the average high. If you wanted to keep the whole day below freezing, you would need the temperatures to be 20 degrees below normal. So you're really talking about a wickedly cold air mass. I mean, we have a cold air mass, no question. I think you could even say you have a very cold air mass that's in the eastern part of the United States for this time of year. Do you have a wickedly cold air mass? I would say probably I wouldn't call it wickedly cold. Although it sure felt that way when I went out to grab my dinner. The inverted trough, Anthony Orr is correct. It bulges to the north. Okay, so usually when you see the isobars with a cold front, they kind of go, they make that V, the V shape. Well, it's an inverted trough is just an upside down V. You have southeast winds on one side, and you have northeast winds on the other side. Whereas on a standard trough, you would have northwest winds on the left side, and you would have southwest winds on the right side. Johnny Quest, you're going to be skating over there. I just know it. Yeah, it's the burst of snow I think that you're going to watch. Ryan Kane, you're hoping to get a snow day out in Baltimore. Well, you better get a good burst of snow and sleet to come into the mix. That's for sure. And Mount Holly, you know what? This is what we're seeing here is something like what we're seeing, in general during the winter months. And the NAM handled those systems last winter, as we all remember, extremely well. So I don't see why it wouldn't be the case this time around. So I'm always of the idea that you kind of stay with something that works until it stops working. Savage players, Central Jersey, north of 195. I think it's possible. It'll be brief, but it's possible. So the NAM indicates it. A couple of the other models indicate that there's a possibility. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out. So Ethan Kerr, Ocean County, getting a flake of east or western Ocean. You might see some flakes. You know what? At the start, if it comes in a hurry, you might see some flakes mix in. But you know what? If you're east of the Parkway, and particularly if you start to go close to the bay, and on the other side of the bay, I'd be shocked if you wind up seeing flakes. Maybe you might see some ice pellets in there, but that would be very, very brief. Let's call it the cheapest of cheap thrills when it comes to that. Flurries in Chicago, 99 Wolves. Well, you know what? You're on the northern edge of the precip of that system as it pulls out. I guess you could. You might be able to squeeze out one or two. You find it hard to believe the HRRR's moderate to heavy dynamic snow for DC, says Joshua Pan. Let me take a look. Hold on. Let me take a look at that again. So let's go to the HRRR model. Does have a lot of sleet there, that's for sure. And then it goes, well, it starts, you get some light rain that comes in. This is the new one, by the way. I'm getting the new one out to 13 hours. And this is by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's got sleet, and it actually has snow. Look, if it comes down hard enough with good vertical motions, you might wind up with snowflakes out of this. That is cold air that's wedged down there. This is not, you know, this is not dirty cold air. This is cold Canadian air that's wedged down there. So it means business. Excuse me. It means business. So, you know, if you get the intensity in the precip, as that very warm tropical air lifts up northward, you are, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if you wind up seeing some snow there in DC. Is it possible the low moves out further east, or will it hug the coast? It's going to hug, Andrew. It's too bad we don't have more blocking. If you wound up, if you had the NAO, if that North Atlantic oscillation, instead of being down at neutral, was already going into negative territory and really dropping fast, then you could have maybe wind up with that low a bit further to the south than what's being indicated. But it comes almost, it comes a day or two too late, it seems, for that to be the case. All right, folks, we're coming up on a quarter past the hour. John, I don't think we'll get a warming trend for Thanksgiving. I mean, it looks like, you know, it might moderate after the middle of next week, but I mean, it doesn't look like anything. You know, no ridge in the east, that's for sure. Certainly nothing like what the models had back a couple of weeks ago. That idea is gone, especially with that crashing NAO. All right, so got to call it a night here at this point, folks. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it greatly. Again, if you're on a Droid device and you're in the New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Southern Connecticut, the Hudson Valley, I think this app would work for you. And it's absolutely free. So if you're on an Android device, I'll put the link up again for those of you who would be interested. You can download it. This will give you access to the link. In fact, I'll also, let me just get, okay, so I'll give you the Google Play. Or if you go to Google Play and just put in my name, Joe Chaffee, you'll pick that up. So thank you for those of you who've considered it. And if you want a really complete weather experience, as I've been calling it, you can hook it up with well, you can't connect it together. They would be separate, but you can subscribe to my Patreon platform for just $2 a month, and you'll get all weather all the time, exclusive live streams just for Patreon members, and a bunch of other things. So you can give that a look as well. Ryan Ford, yes, I will be on the Joe and Joe show tonight, but it'll only have one Joe on it, and that's me. And that'll be probably at about 9:15 Eastern time. So you can tune into my Facebook page for that, folks, at Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Mirtha Gunter, watch for the ice. Let me know what happens. I'd be curious to see what you get where you are. And Israel upload time will be after midnight. So if you're not up, you'll have to wait till the morning. John Trabacchino, you have a good night. See you over on the Patreon board. And Scott Briller and William Huber and Howard Vanderhoff, we'll see you also a little bit later on either on Facebook or on Patreon. And it will be a live stream for Patreon members tomorrow morning at probably either 9:30 or 10 o'clock, depending on how late I sleep to on Thursday morning. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you later.